All right, let's talk about something really specific today. We're going to look at how you teach English when, the basics just aren't going to cut it. This is all about English with a purpose and how these super specialized language courses are actually built from the ground up.
So let's just dive right in. Think about it for a second. How do you actually teach English to an air traffic controller? Where a single miscommunication could be absolutely catastrophic. Or what about a biologist who needs to publish critical research? Or a lawyer who's drafting a complex international contract?
The answer becomes pretty clear, pretty fast. A standard textbook just won't fly. You can't just hand someone a generic grammar book and hope for the best. Nope, the needs are way too specific, and honestly, the stakes are just far too high.
Okay, so if a standard book is out, what's in? Well, it all starts with what you could call the course's master plan. This is the fundamental blueprint for everything that follows.
And that master plan has a name. It's called a syllabus. Now, this is way more than just a list of topics. Think of it as the complete plan of what's supposed to be achieved through the whole process of teaching and learning. It's really the roadmap that guides both the teacher and the student toward their final goal. But building that roadmap, it is not simple. A great course designer has to think like a psychologist, a linguist, and maybe even an anthropologist all at once. Yeah, they've got to consider theories of language and learning, but also, and this is so crucial, they have to deeply understand the learner. We're talking about their cognitive level, their background, and most importantly, what are their aspirations? What do they need?
So how do they actually structure this plan? Well, it turns out there isn't just one way to do it. The best way to think about it is like a toolbox that has 6 different blueprints for learning. And course designers, they rarely just use one. They're almost always mixing and matching to create that perfect fit.
Let's open up that toolbox and take a look at the first one. This is the classic, the one you probably remember from school. It's the structural syllabus.
This approach has a really clear trade-off. The focus is pure grammar. The whole idea is that grammar is the absolute core of the language. Now, its strength, it's great for mastering the forms, the nuts and bolts. But the limitation is huge. Students might know all the rules in the book, but they still freeze up when they actually have to use the language in a real conversation.
So, what's the alternative? Let's move on to blueprint number 2, which takes a totally different approach. This is the notional/functional syllabus.
Instead of focusing on rules, this one focuses on purpose. It asks, what do you want to do with the language? It's all about functions. Things like expressing agreement, or greeting someone, or apologizing. The strength here is pretty obvious, right? It directly boosts a learner's ability to actually use English out there in the real world.
Okay, let's build on that idea with our third blueprint, the situational syllabus.
This approach gets even more practical. It organizes everything around specific real-life situations. The language you need at the restaurant is totally different from the language you'd use for one day on the beach. This just shows that context is everything. The goal is to help learners use language appropriately, exactly where and when they're going to need it.
Now for the final 3 blueprints, and these get even more specialized. These are really the bread and butter of what we call English for Specific Purposes, or ESP.
So first you've got skill-based. This one really hones in on one of the 4 key skills, like, say, teaching an engineer how to skim a technical report super quickly. Then there's task-based, which is all about completing a real-world job, like actually writing that technical manual from start to finish. And finally, content-based. This is where the subject matter itself is the curriculum. You learn the English of biology by studying biology, just in English.
Okay, so we've got our toolbox full of different syllabus types, but how do you actually put it all together? Let's take a look at the assembly line for building the perfect course.
It's a pretty logical 5-step process. You start by analyzing the needs, then you define your objectives, and only then do you design the syllabus and pick out your materials. And at the very end, you figure out how you're going to assess and evaluate whether it all worked. It's a clear, methodical path from start to finish.
But of all these steps, there is one that stands head and shoulders above all the others. One that, if you get it wrong, the entire course is basically guaranteed to fail.
And that brings us to the most crucial first step, needs analysis. This is all about putting the learner, and only the learner, right at the absolute center of the entire process.
The source material could not be clearer on this point. It says, quote, "Needs analysis is the first and most crucial step in ESP course design. Everything else, the syllabus, the materials, the tests, it's all built on top of this one foundation." So what does analyzing needs actually mean? Well, it's not just one thing. It's more like a three-part investigation. First, you look at the target situation. Where does the student need to be? What will they be doing with English? Then, you analyze the present situation. Where are they right now? What are their current skills? And finally, you have to look at their learning needs. How do they learn best? Do they like visual aids, or are they more hands-on?
Wow, that is a huge amount of information to gather, right? So how do course designers actually figure all of that out?
Well, they use a whole range of investigative tools. They'll send out questionnaires and conduct really in-depth interviews. They'll actually go and observe learners in their classroom or maybe even in their future workplace. They'll dig in and analyze the authentic materials the learners will have to use, like real reports and manuals, and they'll consult with experts and employers to get the complete picture.
So, here is the bottom line. Whether you're teaching grammar rules or real-world tasks, using a structural syllabus or a content-based one, it all comes back to a deep, detailed, and genuine understanding of the student and their world. Which really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. After everything we've seen about putting the learner first, if you were the teacher designing one of these super specialized courses, what's the very first question you would ask your students?